Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Here with Courtside with Lawman.
And Carmen B.
And again, we will start with a disclaimer, and that is that this show is for informational and educational purposes. And although we will answer your questions related to criminal law, if you call into the show or if you give us a question in the chat or if you email us a question, the answering of that question, however, does not establish any type of attorney-client relationship between the caller and myself or Mr. Staten, lawman.
Yes. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope well.
We
had a
hope
little
so.
rain this week, so that was good. Nice to wash off the dust.
Needed here in
Definitely.
California.
Definitely. And then there's things going on all over the world tonight, I guess, right?
There are quite a few events that are happening. And tonight, what we're going to do is talk about some of the events that are the major events that are in the news, as well as answer any questions that come into the show.
Yeah, general criminal law questions and things like that. And I think we wanted to talk something about the Chauvin trial that's going on right now.
Yes, yes.
Because they're doing jury selection, right?
They are. And I'm pretty sure that everyone is aware of this. I believe it's Derek Chauvin is the officer who killed or who murdered George Floyd, that we were able to see happening in front of our eyes because it was recorded as it was happening. He is the officer that kneeled on his neck for that almost 9-minute time period.
So, when they're selecting the jury, one of the big things that's come up is the settlement that happens right about now. Now, they probably should have handled that a little bit differently in terms of settling the civil case at the time that they're picking a jury in a criminal trial. But I hear that that's one of the issues on getting good jurors is who hasn't heard about the settlement.
And just so that we're clear, the settlement is a result of the civil case that was filed. And although that is based on the same factual events as the criminal case, they are two separate issues.
Because one of the biggest differences between civil and criminal is consequence. You go to jail in criminal, you got to pay in civil. And there's some other ones too.
Now, you also in criminal cases may be ordered to pay some fines and fees and that sort of thing if you're convicted, but usually it is nothing to the extent of what you will be forced to pay if you are found liable civilly. That being said, Mr. Staten, is Chauvin going to be the person that's paying that $27 million settlement to the family?
I believe it would be the city, because the city would have the insurance policy that would cover his wrongdoings.
Because it occurred during the course of his employment.
Yes.
So his pockets are not actually impacted at all by that settlement. Derek Chauvin, pays not a penny of that money. That money comes from the city.
Now, there is a way, though, like in civil law, it's sort of like sue everybody, because just in case, if they fail to pay on his behalf or decide that his acts are so malicious that it went over and above his duty, maliciously, then I think they could refuse to pay, and then he's liable civilly on his own. Personally, his assets can get taxed.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but because this is an agreed upon settlement, I don't believe that would occur. The city has agreed.
Has already stepped up.
Yes, they've already said that they will pay the money.
True.
And so it is the city that will be paying that money.
Yeah.
And by the city, what we really mean is, where does the money for any city come from?
Taxpayers.
So the taxpayers are paying for the misconduct of officer or ex-officer Chauvin.
Well, can he go get a job somewhere else? I wonder who would hire him.
Well, my understanding right now is that there are people who are donating to a fund to provide for the living expenses of not only ex-officer Chauvin, but the other officers that were involved in this grave injustice.
That's true. Yeah. And I mean, and that money comes from private individuals, so it's retained privately. So, but
Yeah, there's no way to stop people from donating for the support of another person.
right, and no amount of money is going to bring anybody back. So, when you're talking about settlements and money and things like that, we're trying to put a price on life, and I don't think there is one yet. So,
not only is there not a price that you can put on someone's life, but also the fact that people hear $27 million and they think that that's what the family is going to get. Usually when a settlement happens, whatever that mass settlement amount is, out of that amount are going to come the attorney's fees,
right.
unless the attorneys have done it pro bono, which I don't believe is the case here.
I doubt it.
And so the attorney's fees range usually anywhere from 25% to 33% to 40% or
True.
more if the case is actually proceeding to trial.
Right.
So a huge portion or percentage of that 27 million is actually going to be utilized to pay the attorney's fees.
And I mean, attorneys have to get paid too. One thing in this case, though, I mean, you noted is that it was an agreed upon settlement prior to trial. In fact, it might have been prior to the taking of a lot of depositions and things because the criminal case is running simultaneously. So people you would want to talk to may be hindered in terms of giving depositions and things because of the criminal trial that's going on. They're all witnesses, possibly.
I don't, unless the court issued an order, I don't think that would necessarily, I guess the judge could issue an order regarding witnesses discussing it.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that this was pre-trial. There was not a trial date set in the
Right.
civil case.
Oh, yeah.
The civil case had been filed, but they had been negotiating towards a settlement, and this is the settlement that was reached. Now, lawman, I have a question. Why have the settlement occur and make the announcement about the settlement just at the start and during the jury selection of the criminal case?
Well, I got a theory. I'll throw this out. If I want to, and I'll say it, if I want to damage the pool of jurors available, then I would do that because most people are going to be interested in the settlement. They're going to know all about the case. So when they come forth in the criminal case, they may be disqualified because they have such knowledge of the civil case and what they received. So,
and I don't think that it would be the knowledge alone that would disqualify them, because this case has been worldwide news. The murder of George Floyd was worldwide news.
But maybe not the settlement.
Maybe not, but well, I've seen it in every major newspaper, so I'm going to say that it is worldwide news. I think that they are hard pressed to find someone who has not heard about it.
Right.
But the issue is not just whether or not you've heard about the case or heard about the settlement, but whether or not, despite having that information, that you can still be a fair juror and listen impartially to the evidence and make a decision based upon the evidence.
Well,
but when you
okay, go ahead.
When you say that you think that it was done strategically,
right?
By what side and for what purpose?
By the prosecution, and because let's just say most African Americans will know of this case, have felt emotional about this case, and would probably say, I don't think I can be fair.
Well, why would the prosecution want to hinder people from being fair?
Well, it's not just people, but it would be African Americans, so that there is not a lot of African Americans on the jury. It's the backfire, I would say, of an OJ theory.
But isn't that something in this particular case that the defense would actually be doing, since the prosecution is actually prosecuting Mr. Chauvin? and should be doing their best to get a conviction based on this evidence. Uh,
Well, you would think so, but what underlies what someone wants to do is sometimes hard to predict. Like I mentioned OJ only because in the OJ trial, the prosecution thought, hey, white or black women are not going to like OJ. They've been sold on the fact that, well, they have a lot of resentment to OJ in the community, and OJ is not a prominent man in the black community. Therefore, the more blacks we have, it may be we're being fair. Look at how many blacks we got on the jury, but yet their opinions may not be pro OJ. And I think that was a bad calculation, like a few other things in that particular trial. So I'm just I'm just thinking if I could narrow the pool so that most African Americans may not serve on it, well,
But why would the prosecution want to do that in this particular case? Every side in a case wants jurors who are going to be fair, but you look for jurors who will be favorable to a certain extent, not so
true.
that they're not fair, but favorable to your side, right? So why would the prosecution not want African Americans on that jury? I would think that the opposite would be true, and that the prosecution would for the sake of the jury appearing to be a fair and
right,
impartial
right.
unit, would also want African Americans on that jury. I actually think that this is more of a strategy from the city in an attempt to protect Officer Chauvin, because they have created now. There are people who may feel like, well, my goodness, his family has been paid $27 million.
Hasn't he suffered enough?
Hasn't they've received compensation, and so should this officer be punished? He was just doing his job, right? And so there may be people who feel that way, who are like, well, now that we've heard about this settlement,
right, everything's taken care of.
Everything's taken care of. They've been paid. So do we really need to convict this guy?
I don't know. I'll tell you something. I mean, the state of America and its race and relations and how we all get along means that anything can happen. Anyone can take positions that don't make sense, basically. And then in the end, the way it comes out may be the way certain forces wanted it to really come out. So, it's, I guess if I was trying the criminal case and I was a prosecutor, I would want more African Americans. But then again, am I going to get them? I mean, what is my pool going to be like there? There's no change of venue that went on here.
Well,
so
here's the interesting thing about that. After the settlement came out, it was actually the defense that made a motion. I'm not quite sure if I know they made a motion for change of venue. They may have also made a motion for mistrial. And I think that was partly based on the fact that there was one juror who was relieved from being a possible juror based on the fact, and I believe this was an African-American gentleman, based on the fact that he indicated that once he heard about the settlement, that caused him to believe that the city settled because Chauvin was guilty.
Right. Which, of course, the standard is completely different, but it would make people believe that. You're right.
It would make some people believe that, but it would make other people believe the opposite of that, which is, or not really the opposite, but cause them to believe that the family has been paid and therefore there's really no need to proceed with this prosecution.
Criminally, right. I mean, giving him somewhat of a break somehow,
A break that others, when they're accused of crimes, do not get.
True. I mean, the average ordinary person coming downtown Sac is not going to get that kind of love. So, but that's because this is a high profile, revealing snapshot of America and the complications that go along with litigating things here. even now. I mean, you got to figure cases like Dred Scott and stuff where that we're talking about strictly, are these people human or not? You know, that happened here in this country. It was debated back and forth, and people decided, well, no, you're not. So anything can happen. I mean, this is where we came from. And, they say, if you don't learn anything throughout your history, you tend to repeat it. And are we on that kind of movement backwards because some people want to ratchet it up? I mean, look at how GOP Republicans and the things that come out about their lifestyles and what they believe in and things like that. And these are elected officials with power at least to gain money, to change societies and things like that, neighborhoods. And they're holding these positions and feelings that appear that they may have some animosity towards others of color. I mean, look at the shooting in Georgia.
That brings us to that incident, the shooting that happened in Atlanta. I believe that was on Sunday.
Yeah, and the sheriff specifically, and what he came out and said.
That's where language is important when it comes to talking about crimes, the culprit, the suspect who was arrested.
Yeah.
So in cases where we see an African American person who is arrested for a crime and it makes news, they are talked about in some of the most despicable terms. They're called monsters, animals. Back in the Clinton days, super predators, right?
Yep.
You could have
gang members now. Gang members, you get that categorized. Yes. That's just, if you're a gang member, evil. That's all you can do.
And we are not in any way or shape or form justifying criminal acts.
Correct.
But what we are saying is that how those acts are discussed tends to vary depending on who the suspected perpetrator is.
Correct.
Now, had this been an African American person who shot and killed 8 people, would you remember what's the total number that this guy was?
How many?
Total of 12 that he shot.
Yeah, there's some that survived.
But eight that lost their lives.
Yeah.
And you have was it the chief of police?
A sheriff, I think.
Discussing it as the guy had a really bad day. So now the crime is no longer about him. It's about the fact, the circumstances surrounding his day.
Right.
Well, I've seen instances where you have young, poor African American individuals who are accused of crimes, and they are talked about in such a foul manner. And we don't get that here. Why? Why is that?
Well,
what does that say about our society?
That we have not moved genuinely forward. Here's what I saw. When I read and this always, it gets me. The sheriff does get on TV and say, I regret saying that. Now, I got to analyze it. I got to go, okay, I've heard that before. People always say, I regret saying it. But you know what that really means? And because that's all I hear from you, is you regret saying it.
You meant it.
That's right.
That's
right. That's what you meant. You just were weak and said something out loud that you were thinking, that you felt, because that tends to be the thing. People say, I got to reassess my position and how I feel, and I need a little cuddling and stuff. But that's not what he said. He didn't say at all. He just said, I regret saying that. I regret saying. So what does that really tell us? I mean, that means you maybe slipped up and said some things you didn't really want to say, but yet you did feel, what's the big deal? You had a bad day. I mean, maybe not that way, but I always look at the apology when people say things, because it's so popular to apologize. You get right on, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. My diabetes was messing up. So I had a sugar run. Therefore, I felt a little racist, which now you know what that sounds like? Wow, how appropriate. Sounds like a Twinkie defense, right? Remember Moscone?
Yes.
Sounds like a Twinkie defense, really. Oh man, you know what? I was all hyped up on Twinkies, so I just ran down to City Hall and just shot up people. I mean, I don't know. Maybe so. You know.
But it's not, since they're the ones that, I mean, as someone who says something like that and is not really held to account for it.
Yeah.
This, if he was the sheriff, he is the sheriff in a town of people who are African American.
Yeah. Apparently, if he was, I know, of any province in Georgia, pretty much near Atlanta.
Atlanta is considered to be
it's the new chocolate city.
Yeah, the Black
yeah.
Mecca.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is someone who has a sheriff or a police chief has an extreme amount of power.
Yes.
And what strikes me is what he said is what he felt, and it's what he really meant.
That's right. That's right.
And we have in the chat a comment from Borkai, and she stated exactly that. He meant exactly what he said. And that apology that he gave was not an apology. It was basically just, oh, I said that out loud, and I offended those of you. Okay.
I regret saying that.
I regret saying it. Not that it's not true.
I'm not sorry.
No, he didn't say he was sorry. Just he regret. Okay, you need something. I'll give you that. I regret it.
Yeah. And I mean, it just goes back to how we try to. It's become the thing to do. You know, actresses all over, right? People say something, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm sorry. And the guy with the whole sugar spike.
You'll have to.
Oh gosh, you don't know that? Oh gosh.
Okay.
High school team was playing. Okay, this guy's the announcer. The high school team kneeled for the national anthem.
Okay.
And he started ranting, these damn niggers, this, that, and all that stuff on the air and stuff.
Oh, he actually said the N-word.
Yes. Once he saw them kneel, but then said, "Oh, I must have had a sugar spike."
Did he say that in the same conversation, or
when
you
everybody,
when they
said,
later
"Excuse
when he
me,"
was approached about it?
Later, I had a sugar spike.
Oh, I didn't know that a sugar spike could make you racist.
Hey,
I was unaware of that. I've never had a doctor tell me that.
Cane sugar.
And I've, as much as I love my snacks as much as the next person, and that's not mine, but it may become mine later. But I've never had an episode where I've had so much sugar it made me racist.
Me neither. No. I might have high blood pressure and I'm still, not racist, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I am. Who knows? But it's almost like it's getting so cliche to just get up and say something.
Even if that's something that you say doesn't make sense. Right. And the purpose in that, I believe, for most people is just, okay, I have to try and save my job. Right. There'll be a recall or people demanding that I resign. Right. So if I give some semblance of an apology, even if it's not an actual apology, that'll calm down the masses and I can go on with my job and my racist beliefs.
My alcoholism that made me do it. Yeah, wait, but what about the lady? Another teacher, or the teacher who made the young black kid clean out the toilet with his hands. I hear they have not fired her or anything. I can't remember the jurisdiction, but yeah, that was a big deal. I mean,
why is the child cleaning the toilet? Well, period. We have janitors in schools for that.
It was ridicule, to go clean the toilet or something like that. But
and that's an inappropriate punishment to be meted on a child, and purposely. But
health issues
especially in this Corona time period when we know that COVID-19 is contained. One of the strongest places that it's contained, they believe, is in feces.
Really?
Yeah.
That was, but once again, I'm waiting for her apology, right? I'm waiting. Oh, I just want to teach the kid a lesson.
I don't even want her apology. Hearing that story, I want her fired.
Yeah, and that's what, and people will move to do that, and she'll get fired, like police officers do who shoot people, and then they'll
They
go to
don't
the
all
next.
get fired.
No, they'll go to the next jurisdiction. They'll go to another place and get hired again. So, I mean, our our study, our experience in this country is constantly changing. It's constantly moving, and I don't think. Well, for example, I was reading something about critical race theory, that the governor of Florida wants to get rid of critical race theory in Florida's educational system. Okay. Now I was going, okay, what is critical race theory, right? And it's acknowledging that racism is an institution in our institutions here, and trying to just say we have to not mention that it is and just move on, basically. Now, if I don't know, I didn't define critical race theory. I don't know who defined it and decided that's what it means. But if in fact you're telling us that we want to just forget about our history and our past and what happens tomorrow and today, we want to just ignore the things that occur. If that's what it means, I don't think anyone should be down for that. I mean, you know, if you don't know your history, if you are not aware of it, you are doomed to repeat it. And maybe that's what individuals want is, or they want to just stop apologizing for using the N word, for being racist. You see, and hey, if I don't have to, if you agree, it's just racist society. So what? We don't talk about it. I don't have to deal with it. But it's impossible. It's just impossible because turn on the news, read something on Facebook, anywhere, you'll see it happening. What about the woman? Her bank account. She goes in, the teller tells her, "Ooh, I'm uncomfortable giving you this money," out of her bank account. What was that? Yeah, I know. I was Facebooking too much because I'm in trial, so I'm up all night. So, so I'm looking at everything, as crazy as it is. But
Was
yeah,
there some, the only reason that I could see that possibly justify that is if the teller had some concern that she was not the person. But if she had presented her identification, or if the teller knew
her
her
bank
from
card.
prior contacts, or yes, she had
Yeah,
the bank card and knew the PIN code,
yep,
I don't know what your uncomfortable level has to do with you
right.
providing me my funds.
But we see things
And
similar to
what
that.
happened with that?
I think she got her money. I mean, I hope, but I mean, but the teller just said, "I'm uncomfortable, giving you this money."
And so did she
I'm pretty
initially
sure
not give it to her, and
well,
did law
probably
enforcement
tried
have to
not
be
to.
called?
I don't think it was law enforcement, but maybe a manager, had to come out and stuff,
Mhm.
and say, "Give her money. That's her account."
But
But
that's why, as individuals, we have to stand up for ourselves in those
right,
spaces.
isn't that the institutionalized racism that goes on when people can do that to you and act like it's normal? See, it's not just that they do the act, but they do the act because they feel justified in doing it.
That I don't know. That one particular teller that I would
Yeah,
classify that as institutional racism, since it sounds like the manager
it might have
came
just
over
been one person.
and handled it. That
Okay,
was
but one person
that.
becomes a second person, becomes a third.
It can be if they're allowed to get away with
That's
it.
right, and yeah, and
And you need to call them on these kind of actions.
that's
And
right.
calling them on those actions doesn't mean, necessarily yelling at them or screaming at them. You can very politely, and I've had to do this many a time in my life. Thank you very much. What I need to do now is to speak to your supervisor or
Right.
your manager or someone else in charge,
Oh yeah,
because you can no longer help me.
right. And but we shouldn't have to go through that. Is the
We
problem,
shouldn't.
right?
We
We holler, leave us alone. Let us do our thing, and that's funny because one day we'll probably have a talk about that. When we our cries of leave us alone maybe seem much stronger than just words. In that, well, maybe we need to start thinking about what we should be doing with each other in order to build our strength and not depend on the common systems that are in place. Because if we say they are institutionally racialized, I'll make that word up, If we say that that's what they are, how do we change that? How? And so, doesn't it mean that we have to invent our own systems, our own banking, our own neighborhoods, and things like that? So that that is eliminated somewhat because we're still people. We still can hate on each other and things like that, which we do. But that would be one element that may be gone from that our utopian society. Then that it's not in our educational system, in our banking systems, in our policing systems, and things like that. And people get away with treating people rudely.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about establishing something like
Black
what
Nation.
what was in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yes, yes. In fact, I mean,
Black
we're
Wall
gonna.
Street.
That's right. And Westbrook
What happened?
is gonna have a documentary out. But yeah, I mean, look. It, but go ahead and talk about that because I always believe that's one of the answers.
Well,
It
what
really
happened
is.
though? What happened to Black Wall Street? We tried that, right? You're not going to allow us to actively participate in the society that we are a part of. We're
Right.
not second class citizens. We are American citizens, just like anyone else.
And the
But
13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment being passed gave us citizenship, freed slavery, and gave us due process. And they forgot because they gave us the key. Now we can be treated like anyone else. And so from 1865, after the war, post war, we started acting on that, voting, started participating, building cities, towns, and nations. It was wrong.
now you stated that the 14th Amendment ended slavery.
Well, 13th,
I'm
slavery.
sorry, 13th
Yep.
ended slavery. Misspoke. 13th ended slavery.
Yes,
But
I know.
except for
Incarceration. If you have been duly incarcerated. Now here's the thing though. Check this out. I want deep thinkers, check this out. 13th Amendment kept that clause of slavery in it, right? What other amendment kept something in it? The Second Amendment. Because it said, hey, you can have guns all you want, you guys. You guys can gather if you're to be a well-armed militia. You see that? That word? Now that word is becoming popular again, right? I mean, people are starting to say that. We got a militia going on. A well-armed militia. We saw what happened with the Capitol as a possible attempt to use a militia in order to take back power. And now it's funny because this was Bill of Rights, man. This was 1780 at the most, right? When they passed the Bill of Rights. They had the wherewithal to think so far ahead to keep those two things in those two amendments to where they're popping off today.
Well, gun rights as always, and we'll have that at a later time as a topic.
They could have said no guns.
We'll discuss gun rights.
But we need a well-armed militia.
I am an advocate for gun rights because gun rights, if you need to protect your home, if you need to protect yourself, the gun allows you to do that. The gun also can prevent your government from just completely running ripshod over your rights if there needs to be a revolution.
Is
Now,
that the
I'm
well-armed
not saying
militia?
that we are there at that particular point, but I'm going to segue because I do see some questions in the chat. I see Ms. Williams has asked, I'm trying to figure out why they don't have to abide by decent searches to people who are on probation. They should not just be able to come in your house and take it from the floor up, and being Black and on probation is a whole nother thing. That is correct, Ms. Williams. Do you want to answer that question, Mr. Lawman?
I'll let you start, Tom.
Okay. So when you are on probation, you have given up your right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Those who are not on probation have a right to not be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, but you give that up when you agree to be placed on probation. And I mean, most people, of course, if your options are you can either be placed on probation and agree to be searched, or we can send you to state prison. nine times out of 10, most people are going to give up that constitutional right. But it's
Sure.
only given up for the time period that you are on probation. And Miss Williams, that's going to bring us back to an earlier topic that we had discussed, and that is the new law,
Right.
uh, AB 1950, right?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
the probationary periods have been reduced, or you can go back and get your probationary period reduced on certain crimes. Now there are some exceptions. Serious and violent crimes is not going to apply to. I believe
The
there's some
domestic
domestic violence
violence,
crimes.
yeah, and
Uh,
sex cases, pretty
yeah,
much.
sex
Yeah.
cases, which would fall under the serious and violent cases.
Right.
But in uh, Sacramento in particular, the courts would routinely place people convicted of felonies on a
Mhm.
5-year grant of probation,
With
meaning
probation.
during that 5-year time period, with or without probable cause, with or without a warrant, law enforcement or a probation officer could come into your home and search your home from top to bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's why it is advantageous for people who have been on probation 1, 2 years to start thinking about, well, what happens when I hit that second year? Does my crime qualify for that? Because it would be like magic to get to your second year of probation, and all of a sudden you go back and you request to terminate probation, and at the same time fees can get waived, and at the same time they can expunge your matter right then and there, and that search term is now gone.
So we would just remind you that if you are on probation, you should check with an attorney, whether it's myself, Carmen B., or Keith Staten, lawman, regarding whether or not your probationary status can be terminated.
Yes. I mean, that's
Or
it's
you can
yeah.
go to court, and if you're not even close to the 2 years, but you want to go to court and get it reduced to that 2-year time period, you can do that as well.
True. And misdemeanors, of course, now from 3 years to one.
To 1 year. That
Yeah.
is correct.
So I mean, it's
And
very
this is
valuable.
throughout, this is a state law. So this is throughout the state of
That's right.
California.
That's
We,
right.
do you have anything else to say about probation before I move on to the
No,
next
no,
question in the chat?
let's move on.
Okay. From Mr. Mack, he says, from police body cam video, I noticed if a white person accuses a black person of a crime, they automatically are guilty, slammed to the ground, and arrested. Do you want to address that?
Well, I think that is the prevailing attitude when we were talking about that when they come out and they see us, they automatically assume we are violent, we're going to be violent, that we're going to resist, that we're going to do something to someone, that we must have done something to someone if they're upset and they're mad. Um, you see the Karen phenomenon, is that, the woman, I'm crying, and now I'm gonna get on the phone, call the police on you and stuff, and nobody's done anything to her.
And that's why the Karen phenomenon exists, because it
Yeah.
appears that certain people know that if they call the police on certain other people, that the police are going to respond and respond with force based on the person that
Yeah.
they're reporting on, based on that person's race. In fact, the incident
Starbucks
that had
case.
happened with the Karen who was the called the police on the
The
African American gentleman who was the bird watcher.
Yeah.
And she called, and she actually told him before she
Told him
placed
she
the
was gonna
call,
do it.
I'm going to call the police and tell them I'm being assaulted by an African, did she say African American or a black man? But
I
she
don't
made it
know.
clear to him that his race was a factor in her calling the police, and
yeah.
that she was going to use his race to get the police there against him.
And he better run away. You better run now, pal. You better get out of here now. Because when the police come, you're going away. I mean, think about the Starbucks case. That when it's a perfect example of it. Two guys are sitting at Starbucks. Someone calls and says, they're here too long. What?
How is that a police matter?
Right.
How is that a police matter?
Wait.
I have an office. If someone is here and they're sitting in my lobby, now it's kind of different because that's a Starbucks
Private.
Where everybody
Public
goes
place.
and sits. It's open. It's I guess it's open to the public.
Right.
Typically, it's privately owned, but it is open to the public as a business. We know that Starbucks encourages people to come and sit. They provide free Wi-Fi because they want you to purchase, their coffees and their various treats that they
Yeah.
have that are quite delicious, Starbucks, I will say. But and you see all sorts of people in Starbucks, right? You
Yeah.
see people on their laptops,
Yeah.
on their tablets, on their cell phones, and sometimes they've either enjoyed whatever item they've had, but they're
Yeah.
still there, right? And why was it that these particular people were a problem?
My thing is, call the police. But if I'm sitting here and the police come, what are they supposed to say to me? Hey, you've been here too long, and start questioning me or something?
Well, I'm gonna disagree with the, and I think you're being facetious when you say call the police.
Right.
Why are you calling the police?
But see, but that's the point.
There
is
is
that
no
the police,
basis
when they come out,
for
all I'm saying
calling
is
the
when they
police.
come out and you don't have an articulable crime, the police shouldn't even talk to me. They should turn around and go. Why are they even asking me a question? You see what I'm saying?
Well, and again, that boils down to what we're dealing with
Right.
as a society.
That we call
And
institutionalized.
we're coming to terms with the fact
Yeah.
that despite the fact that people, oh, well, we had an African American president, and so we are post-racial. No, we see now, after living through the 4 years of President Trump, that we are not post-racial.
That's right.
And that people make a number of erroneous decisions just based on race.
Yeah.
If the owner of a business thought, a business like a coffee shop, thought that someone had been there too long, they could have approached them and said, hey,
Buy coffee.
what? We need you to buy something, or
Right.
we need you to go, right?
One coffee
But they
every
need,
3 hours.
if they're doing that, if
Everybody,
that's
it should
their
apply
policy,
to.
it
Yep.
has to apply to everybody.
Yep.
You can't just say, oh, only for the African American people. You can't stay once you've been here a half an hour,
Right.
you have to go.
And that sounds like let's see, wasn't there laws and stuff about that? Why I couldn't sit in the coffee shop and stuff? And you say, I mean, is that what they're enforcing? Really? Is that what we're coming back to? I can't enjoy the bird watching over here because she can. I mean, that's what you're really saying. I can't barbecue with my family over here because somebody don't like it. I can't sell water on the side because somebody else doesn't like it, don't want me to. I mean,
or I can't go into my own condominium building because you don't think that I
live here.
Now I have a key and you've seen me open the door, but you're still concerned that how can I live where you live?
The doctor who was loading the van up with supplies, and somebody calls out the question, "What are you doing?" It's amazing sometimes.
We have another question or comment in the chat. Ms. Williams asked or stated that she feels stripped of her pride and privacy. And
Exactly.
we understand that if you
Yes.
are on probation and subject to those searches.
Yeah.
Let me say this, there are allowed as a condition of your probation, if you're on searchable probation, that it's not just probation, it has to be a specific search condition that they can come in and they can do those searches, but they're not allowed to come in and break things. Right? So if they come in and they do a search and they snatch your TV off the wall and break it, you file a claim with the city or the county regarding that property, because that they are not allowed to do. There's a further question. So when I wasn't on probation and the officer cop searched me when I told him not to, wasn't that illegal? We can't really answer that with just that information because it depends on the particular circumstances. If the officer is arresting you, he can search you incident to arrest, even if you tell him not to search you. So we would need more specific details about that incident to answer whether or not that particular search was illegal.
Well, and also, did the officer have an independent probable cause regardless of a search condition or being on probation? Because
It
if
sounds
it
like at that time that she
was
wasn't on
off,
probation.
yeah,
She
see,
was not on
so
probation.
right. So the cop, yeah, can they come and search? Yeah, but they better have sufficient probable cause then to search. And that's those times when you shut up, let your lawyer deal with it. Because,
And again, we're going to repeat this on every segment. If you are stopped by law enforcement, if law enforcement, and sometimes it's not a stop, right? Sometimes you're already
contacted
parked
or
or
just
you're
contacted.
standing
Yes.
and the officer walks up to
Yeah.
you and tries to begin a conversation with
That's
you.
right.
The question that you want to ask is what, lawman?
Am I free to leave?
And if the answer is yes, what do you do?
Leave.
And if the answer is no, what do you do?
Then I will give you my identification and I want to talk to my lawyer only.
And that's it. You don't need to answer any
other
questions
questions
about where you're going,
what you're
where
doing,
you've been,
right,
what your plans are. You don't have to answer those questions.
right,
And we want the public to know that.
right.
You don't have to answer those questions. And if you do, a court may say that that was consensual contact with the officer, that you agreed to have that conversation.
I had a conversation with some people and they were on probation, one on probation, one on parole. And they were pulled over by the cops. And I was going through this litany with them that they still should ask that question, and here's why. Check this out. Even if you're on probation, okay, whether it's in a car or they contact you, when they contact you, you must establish that relationship by saying, "Am I free to leave?" Now they will have to answer that question.
What do I do if the officer doesn't answer the question? What do I do if he calls me a dumbass? He says, I'm standing here talking to you. What do you think?
Then you leave. Because if you are detained, they have to have the reasonable suspicion to detain you, regardless of whether you were on probation, because they don't learn you're on probation until after you have been detained and they learn it.
Unless it's an officer that already knows you and knows that you're on probation based on prior contact.
I would say you still say it because.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that you can't say it, but I'm saying in that instance, when you said, well, you only learn the probation once there's the conversation.
Right.
But if it's an officer who already knows you and knows that you're on probation, he's going to know from the prior contacts. But yes, lawman is correct. You still ask that question.
Still say it.
Am I
free to leave? Because even though you may know I'm on probation, just because of your knowledge of I'm on probation may not justify you even stopping me to do a probation search. You see? I mean, it's a fine line, but you got to see how it works. This is why people they get confused about this. Oh, that's too easy. What do you mean? They'll never believe that. No. You hit an officer with, "Am I free to go?" They got to stop a moment and say, "Well, yes or no." And you've got to establish that because that means they're required to have that reasonable suspicion.
And sometimes there are people who are on probation who have assumed, wrongfully so, that it's a searchable probation.
Right.
And it is not.
So you don't have to be free to be searched.
If you're on probation, you need to carefully review your probation conditions, and those should have been given to you in written form.
Yep. Definitely.
And if it is not listed as a specific condition of your probation, if it was not ordered by the court as a condition of your probation, then you are not subject to search. Being on probation by itself does not make you subject to search. Exactly. It's that added condition of searchable, of being subject to search and seizure.
And it's a fine line, but one of the things I say is you've got to remain cool. That is the coolest time you got to be, because you need to think through the problem. You can see them coming. Most of the time we see the cops coming. That's not a secret. They're behind us. They pull us over. So you got a moment to go, all right, I just need to ask, am I free to leave? Not, why did you pull me over? Big difference. Big difference between those two phrases. Why'd you pull me over?
Because again, we don't want you getting into an argument with the officer. And again, yes, we know that you can give us anecdotal stories of people who challenged the officer and then the officer let them go and they were able to walk away. What we're concerned about is the officer that you run into that's not going to allow you to walk away.
Right.
The officer that is potentially not going to allow you to leave that encounter alive. We want you to survive those contacts with those types of officers. And it is unfortunate, but we are seeing that there are many of them. Now, certainly, we're not saying all, but we're saying that there are many. And it's not just that they're the ones that are the bad actors. There's also the officer who watches the bad actor
Right.
and does nothing to stop him and does not report his illegal conduct.
True. And then, and I mean, and one of my slides in my thing is, which is the good officer? You got the guy who does something bad, you got the guy who then allows him to do something bad, and then you got the guy who really just sits back and just hopes nothing happens to them. I mean, they see it happen, and you got to stand up.
We really need to change policing.
Yeah.
We need to change training. Um, and that is one of the major things that's going to have to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you will hear cries for defund the police. Defund the police, people have tried to make it seem as if the people advocating for that are saying we don't even want police forces. We don't want anyone policing the community. And that is not what defund the police means. Defund the police, from our perspective, means we don't need to have law enforcement that is armed as if they are a military. And for the community, when it comes to funding of a community, whether it's the city budget or the county budget, why is such a substantial portion of that budget going to law enforcement instead of to programs that can actually improve the community long term?
Well, because somewhat people in power decide where the flow goes. And if they do not want the flow to end up in Oak Park, Meadowview, or anywhere, then the flow won't go there.
And then that may be why we may need to change who some of the people in power are.
Right. And who's directing the flow? Who's in control of it? There's nothing like having your own, right? God bless the child that has his own.
And there are a lot of people who say, well, I don't want to get involved in politics. But if you don't, in some way, shape, or form, get
Even
involved
voting.
in politics,
vote.
meaning voting, they could be just as simple
Right.
as voting.
Yes.
But also, you can contact your legislators. They work for you. Let them know your feelings and your thoughts on their budgets, on new laws that are on the table, on by new bills that are being presented, what your position is regarding those things.
They work for us.
Their salaries are paid by your tax dollars.
Right.
So when you say I don't do politics, what you're really saying is I'm going to let somebody else decide the path of my life,
right.
the path of my children's lives.
Right.
So we have to do politics in terms of getting the policies that are going to help the community.
Absolutely. It's imperative. It really is. And you don't have to be black to say that. I mean, that should apply to any
across
community.
The board.
Right, exactly.
But the squeaky wheel, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Right.
So you see there are other groups that get policy when African Americans who have been here and who helped to build this great nation don't get policy.
Yeah. And it brings it just brings up the thing in Georgia, and the whole movement now against Asians, of all kinds and shapes and everything. People are out blatant racist acts upon them. And it's funny because any nightly news, you're going to see, covering a story like that. And I saw, and I forget who it was, but an Asian politician pointed out that this is America. I mean, it was as if one of us was talking about it. It was like, this is America. This is, what we get, so to speak, for being here in a way. You know that it's foul, you know that it's terrible, but you're here, and either you were born here and brought here, or you came on over here. You have now joined this club, and now you're here. So what do you do when society changes and now wants to put you as a target, like they would Muslims, right?
Like they did.
Right. Like any groups, it's going to happen. I mean, and is that the America we want to create?
I don't have a problem standing up for the rights of other groups who are being attacked, but we as African Americans then also need other groups to stand up with us as allies when they see us being attacked.
It's true. I mean, look at what we've done for just a protest movement, right? Um, gay and lesbian movement would pattern themselves and how they pass legislation and to get rights and things like that. You know, it's a
Pattern themselves
after the civil rights movement and protests and putting pressure in the right places and things like that. They so everyone wants the game plan, but is it a fair playing field? And many times it's not, and people can blame we can blame ourselves, we can say, well, it's us that did it, but I can point to laws that would have held us back, that would have said we can't do certain things and stuff. So
redlining.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't have to be current laws on the books.
No,
but policies, right?
There were policies that
Yeah,
impacted your parents. Those policies impact you.
passing land, and I mean, you got to go to the South Carolina coast, and the Geechee land and stuff, where these people, descendants of slaves, have had that property, and now it's a beautiful coastal area. So they're looking to get that property, and the problem becomes how all these heirs and people are fighting over it and things like that, and it just it's a shame because once again, area that seems to be sacred, really sacred, because most of our generations in the past came through South Carolina, and and that's where our landing area was before we split and go north south. And so it's kind of sacred in that way, that this Geechee culture, if you don't know it, look it up and stuff. They try to keep the culture, the tribalism, and things like that together. And how now they're being devastated by people coming in, land developers, and wanting to take their land. And the South. I mean, if you owned acreage in the South, even in Reconstruction, the 50s and 60s and stuff, if you owned your land there, it was an amazing thing because you had generations had worked in order to get that. They did.
But even then, there were many people who were run off there.
Well, sure. That's why I'm saying it's amazing that you would have it even then.
But when you mention wealth in the United States, we can also look at the fact that the country at one time did homesteads where
yeah, claim right.
Where if you would move to a particular area, and usually it did not include us. So it was if white people moved to a particular area or populated a particular state, they could get so much acreage.
Right.
Well, that ownership of land is going to create and did create wealth that then they were able to pass down to their descendants.
Right. And if you had 6 to 8 acres, I mean, you can grow your food.
Oh, you can do all kinds of things. Far larger plots than that. We're talking 100 acres, 200 acres. And I'm still waiting for my 40 acres.
That's right. I'll take 40. That's it. Because 40 acres is a lot of land. It really is. And if they had, I mean, and all it is promises unkept. That's all.
Well, Lawman, we're coming to the close of another episode.
No, we must keep on going.
We're coming to the close of another episode, and you usually like to dedicate the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Or give us a factual statement of enlightenment.
Okay.
And so, are you prepared?
And today I have something for you. However, I do feel that we all work hard every day, to get somewhere. and we got to keep on doing it. We are just now generation, but there were people 50, 100 years before me doing things. And so we have to always raise the flag for doing something and not talking about it. So here's what I'll share with you. And this is a great Indian chief, okay, who said this. And this I find this so prophetic. It's sarcastic, but great. Watch. Before our white brothers came to civilize us, we had no jails. Therefore, we had no criminals. We had no locks or keys, and so we had no thieves. If a man was so poor that he had no horse, teepee, or blanket, someone gave him these things. We were too uncivilized to set much value on personal belongings. We wanted to have things only in order to give them away. We had no money, and therefore a man's worth could not be measured by it. I listen to that and I go, how ironic that they were termed as uncivilized, but to think about that, is really funny because, yeah, they had no jails. Yes, right. They were the civilized ones who knew that what you have, you share with your tribe. Right. And the whole tribalism, I mean, was here. And so our purpose is to share the knowledge that we have with our tribe. And they say in the Indian communities back when they were fighting the white man for their country and their land, a baby was raised by every woman. They would suck on every kid because that meant that they were part of that community, that everybody raised that child. And the African community is done the same way too. It's definitely done in the animal kingdom. We see it all the time. A foster mother, dog, allowing the kittens and things.
Well, it takes a village.
Right.
It takes a village.
Yeah, everyone has to reach out but see, these people are not even the same species. That's where I'm getting the dog. It's not even the same species, but the innate.
Where other animals will adopt another animal.
Exactly. And it's something that's innate, I think, in human beings. We just have to put it at the forefront. We have to practice it.
To take care of each other and realize that when Lawman talks about doing something, he's not talking about doing something that is just for your personal benefit or gain.
Right.
He's talking about doing something that helps
your
us
community
as a whole.
Right.
All of us.
Yeah. All of us are none. I mean, you heard
State
you hear
again,
all the.
State it again. I don't know if they heard you, Lawman.
All of us are none.
All of us are none.
I mean,
and that's talking about our country.
Right.
It's all of us or none of us.
Yeah.
You're not going to leave us out.
Right.
We're not going to allow it. You're not going to leave us out.
And it's heavy stuff. I mean, it's heavy stuff because we have to keep reliving traumas and tragedies and things like that,
But our wealth can't be based on the diamond that we put on our forehead.
That's right. The car that we drive.
That's not where our wealth is.
Right. And we have to recover, so to speak, from being poisoned by that thought process. I mean, some people want you to be that way so that you can take from your brother.
Or not care about your brother.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Sell him
out.
Talk
about how you hate your brother.
Right.
Talk about how you hate a person who lives in another area of town who has done nothing to you.
Right.
And we don't want to see that anymore.
Yeah.
We have to come together as a community, as a city, as a state, as a nation, as a people.
True. So we want to thank you for hanging on, and whoever is out there, we just got to thank you for engaging with us. Bring your friends, bring everybody. We hope to be engaging all the time, with real talk about real issues. Yes. For me, it's anything is subject matter. Anything we can talk about, anything, because we got to talk about everything. And as long as a condition exists that is not positive to our community, then we have to fight through. And who's willing to do the work becomes the issue. And a lot of times we, as Black people, we look at each other and, I'll call him a name and, He's bourgeois, he's not down, he's not this, he's not that, he's not hip, when really, what does that have to do with anything in terms of life? That's my
And
brother.
longevity.
That's my brother. It's my sister. So shouldn't I be thinking of that person in that way? And if you need, shouldn't I provide? Like the guy was saying, nobody ran around poor. If you didn't have a TP and blanket, here you go. Here's yours. And so that way everybody lives, and that person will then feed the next. So enough preaching for this evening.
All right. We thank you for spending the evening with
Definitely.
Courtside with Lawman.
And Carm B.
Thank you.